All right, so the first thing I want you to do is the handout you just received, place that at the back of your portfolio. So you're just going to pop it in there because remember that you're submitting this for a grade at the end of the tour. You don't want to have to go back and dig through everything and find it or fill out incomplete work. So already you have the notes on the Old English and everything from our last lecture. And then for the Canterbury Tales, you completed the Canterbury Pilgrims chart with their characterizations and then that whole reading guide / test review. So I won't see those until the end of tour. So if you always keep everything in your folder, there's no problem. You've done it, it's in there, it's organized. Now that movie review sheet you're going to be using for the first time before we meet again, but you will be using it multiple times this year. So I have only given you one copy, and you can either make copies of that or it's on its learning and you can just download it and print it as often as you need. But I only give you one. The rest of the copies are up to you. So today you're going to be watching a Bronte Country video guide, and I bought this when I was in Haworth studying the Brontes, and I just think it gives a really good overview of the history of the Bronte family. And everything isn't centered on our one author of concern, who is Emily Bronte, who wrote Wuthering Heights, but in fact it covers the whole family because all three of the girls were important literary authors. You may have heard of Charlotte Bronte, who wrote Jane Eyre, so that's her sister, and then the lesser known Anne Bronte, who wrote Agnes Grey. Interestingly, as you'll hear in the video, the three went by pseudonyms because women didn't get published during this time. Publishers didn't like them, so they went by Currer, Ellis, and Acton Bell. That's Charlotte, Emily, and Anne. So they kept their first initial, but gave themselves a male name. So they submitted them to the publishers liked them, and it wasn't until after the fact that they realized, oh, these are women, And Charlotte was pretty well received during her time. Emily became more famous afterwards. One fact that I think is kind of cool, if I had to say which one is the more brilliant writer, I would say Emily Bronte every time that wrote Wuthering Heights. Some people prefer Jane Eyre, and I understand why. But when Charlotte was defending her sister, she wrote in her intro to this work, essentially, a paraphrase is, "My poor little sister, she just didn't know what she was saying. Don't be alarmed if she talks about really ungodly things, because she just didn't know any better." Ridiculous. Her sister was just a genius and was unafraid to talk about kind of the dark side. Also, Emily's and Charlotte's works are fairly dark, but one has a bit more redemption in it than the other. But somehow the Brontes' works get often overlapped or chunked together with the works of Jane Austen. So you might see a list of Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights. Those don't belong together in the same sentence. We will get to Pride and Prejudice and Jane Austen, and it's more social manners at a different era. And yes, romances, but these are Gothic, especially Wuthering Heights, it's Gothic. So the reason I picked this one, it is my probably second favorite book of all time. Here's the evidence. This is my Wuthering Heights book. Most of the pages are not attached anymore. The little flags just represent some of my favorite quotes. It's well loved. But I have you do this because traditionally the girls tend to like, if I can stereotype for a minute, the girls like the romance. It is a very profound love story. It's not 1 Corinthians 13 kind of love. It's obsessive, can't live because you're part of my soul love story. But then for the guys, there's darkness, there's violence, there's supernatural elements, there's incest, it's dark. Nothing is frankincense. The hey, we don't have long. The point being, there's something interesting for everybody that you'll think is interesting. I'm not making any implications against you guys. I just mean, this is not a feminine, girly, chick flick kind of book. So you don't have to be alarmed. Guys, I'm not gonna make you sit through just love and romance. I mean, there's a lot to it. I think this is the most complex character development maybe ever written, for sure ever written by a female. So I love Hamlet. He's really complex. That's written by Shakespeare. And then Catherine and Heathcliff, especially Heathcliff, like, it's just amazing. This is not one I really read for plot. It's one that I read for characterization. So I'm going to just briefly explain what it is that you're doing for next class and then the following class, and then we'll get started on your video. For next time, if you look at the very first page on academic calendar, you can see that on November the 11th, you're going to be reciting Caedmon's hymn to me. It's not long, so you have plenty of time to memorize that. I don't care if you turn it into a song, whatever helps you remember it. And the more you study it, the better you'll remember it. And there's some notes that'll help you with that. The second thing is you're going to be turning in your first movie review. It's Bright Star. Now that is a chick flick, but you're going to have to deal with it this one time. Dr. Tilley and his wife just contacted me and said, have you ever seen Bright Star? We love it. I'm like, have I seen Bright Star? I mean, it is the story of John Keats. The cinematography is phenomenal. But our next lecture is over John Keats, so you'll come in already knowing a lot about him when we're ready for our lecture next time. And he's like my poet crush. I love him. Now, December the 9th is your Wuthering Heights test. So why are we studying Charlotte and Emily Bronte and the intro to their family and the intro to Wuthering Heights now? Because, well, it's long. So now a lot of this is introduction and glossary, but it's long. So I'm giving you 2 full months to read Wuthering Heights. You need to pace yourselves. If you got into crunch time with Canterbury Tales, you don't want to get in crunch time with that. I mean, it would be hard. I would recommend just a few chapters a week, you know, and just take it bite-sized chunks. And then you have a lot of introduction here for you. It repeats some of what I said and gives you more info too. It's where it says, Dear Students, right after the video guide. So you're going to read through that before you start reading. And I don't care which version. It could be checked out from the library. It could be electronic version, as long as it is the whole, complete, unabridged text of Wuthering Heights. And then you're going to answer the questions. Notice Volume 1 and Volume 2. That means Volume 1 would be good to read in October, and Volume 2 would be good to read in November, and then you would be all done. These questions are to help you process through what's most important, similar to how we did with Canterbury Tales. Okay, if you can answer these, then it means you're understanding what you read. In no way should you just read the questions, look for the answers, and be done with it, because that will not help you process the book. You read the book, you answer the questions, and if you're struggling with comprehension, then feel free to look at Spark Notes or something like that afterwards to help make the connections. There are genealogy tables. If you get confused with who's who, you could look, but it is a bit of a plot spoiler. So some of your book editions will have that in it. Just know, I mean, it says who dies when and who has what babies, so it is a plot spoiler, but would help you kind of piece together all the characters. The brief framework, so that you don't get confused right away. You have a story that is kind of, it starts here and it ends here. Everything in the middle is a memory of what happened leading up to this point. So when you are first starting the book, you're meeting a guy who's renting a home from this family, and you see certain characters, and then it goes into talking about those characters' parents and them and their children, and then you're back to the end. Okay, if you need any help as you're going through, like, I don't understand, then Spark Notes or Miss FO, you know, we're your resource to kind of stay on track. Any questions so far? So that test is the following time. Also with Wuthering Heights, and I'll remind you of this next time, the movie version, only this movie version, you can do for extra credit after you read Wuthering Heights, but before the essay test. So that one's going to be optional for you. I'll tell you more about that next time. All right, find your video guide and let's get started. Michael, can you hit the record button again?
Miss Delpa, are we